Prabhu, you are very kind. I hope the bar has not been set too high for tonight, but I am excited to speak for all of you tonight. And this is not only my first time speaking for this group, but my first time speaking on this topic. I've never presented before on Krishna consciousness or um, anything like that. So this is very important night for me, and I think it's great that I get to share with such wonderful people who I've gotten to interact with, here and there over the last few weeks. So this is really special. So I hope I can live up to the introduction from Gaur Kumar Prabhu. Before I start, let me just share the correct screen. You got that? Okay. I just want to open up with some prayers and then I'll get started. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Tadati Swapatantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Pada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sabadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishaka Vidamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagapate Kopesha Kopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So tonight, I thought about the topic of relationships actually after the talk a few weeks ago about, I forget who gave it now, but about forgiving yourself and not being too hard on yourself. And the title I have here, Krishna Consciousness and Relationships, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Lord, is a play on the movie Dr. Strangelove. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but it's a pretty classic science fiction film from the 60s about how the Cold War took a very dangerous turn and basically the world was going to end because a general, had figured out a way to preemptively strike the Russians and start a nuclear holocaust. And this was, a kind of a dark comedy look at this idea of nuclear deterrent. And is it really a deterrent when the world is going to end no matter who strikes first? So in that movie, all the principal characters are concerned with trying to stop this atrocity from happening, and they're powerless. So in the end, they learn to stop worrying and love the bomb, which is going to be their destruction. But of course, we need to turn that on its head. And in this case, relationships can sometimes be equated to a battlefield. Pat Benatar saying that love is a battlefield. But if we can approach relationships not necessarily as war, but as love, and focus on Krishna and how we can use his teachings to approach our relationships in a healthier way, we can stop worrying and love the Lord. So as Gaurakumar mentioned, I did meet him first, him and his wonderful wife Nietzsche, at the Bhakti Center through Andrea and her service there. But before that, Andrea had found the devotees through the 22nd Avenue Gita class. Atmanavedana and Subhadra have had that class now for I think 8 or 9 years. And I remember she would bring home prasadam and she'd be like, here, eat this, eat this, eat this, just eat this. And I, at the time I had no inkling of where she was going, what she was doing, but every time she came back from the class, she had more and more light, more and more joy. And it was something that was incredibly positive for her every time she went and attended. And she learned more and more and met more and more people. And then one night I went down with her to 26 Avenue to listen to the class, and they were reading the Bhagavad Gita. And many years ago, I had read the Mahabharata and through it the Bhagavad Gita, but only in an academic sense, never in a devotional way. So to hear, I believe it was Chandrasekhar Swami was the first Swami that I ever heard to speak about such really interesting topics. Was very, I'm not sure, it lit some type of light inside of me, which had been dormant for a very long time. So I share these things about my past just so you can have an idea of where I'm coming from in this. Religion before, in my younger years, was difficult. For much of my teenage years and my young adult life, I was very much atheistic. And the last few years, Guru Kumar is correct, have been a real transformation for me. And my wife and I have seen incredible things since we've been involved with the devotees and with the Bhakti Center, and now here in Gainesville in the Alachua Temple. It's just there are several chapters in life, and I can definitely mark off a new one from when our path in Krishna consciousness began. So this is a lot of the things that I'll speak about tonight are my own realizations through my own life, and things that I've taken away from these few verses that I want to look at. So, so the first part here I listed as 3 keys for a relationship, for any relationship really. I don't know if they're necessarily keys. I had originally put numbers of 1, 2, and 3, but I don't think that any of these is more important than another. I think that they all work together to inform and to build the health of any relationship. And compassion, intention, and love. And compassion is an interesting word because a lot of the times when we think of the word compassion, we just think of being nice to somebody or being kind or listening. But compassion actually comes from the Latin word compati, which means to suffer with. To suffer with. So compassion is not just listening to somebody or patting them on the shoulder. Compassion is literally being with them in whatever they're going through. You don't have to be suffering to be compassionate, or somebody doesn't have to be suffering to receive your compassion. But when someone is suffering, you share that with them to a certain degree. Now, this does say any relationship, of course. You're meeting somebody on the street, you're not going to have the same relationship as with your spouse or your boyfriend or your girlfriend or your father or your mother. But the idea that no matter who we interact with, if we can just understand a little bit of what they're going through, that can help a lot in bridging that relationship. Everybody has some type of baggage, from this life or previous lives. And some people don't understand all the things that they come with. And it's not necessarily our position to help every single person we see figure out their lives. But compassion, even if it's just a general surface level of compassion and understanding, that goes a long way. Patience, or intention in this case, refers to the idea of not necessarily jumping too far ahead. If you are trying to build a relationship with somebody, you can't anticipate what's going to happen at the end of that relationship because you have to build the stuff that comes before it. So your intentions are very important. Intention obviously comes from the word intend. What do you mean to do? What do you mean to say? Sometimes our intentions are different from our actions. Sometimes our intentions are different from our expectations, which we'll talk about later. And then finally, there's love. And love is a very interesting word because it doesn't come, at least in English, it doesn't come to us from Latin. It actually comes from the Proto-Germanic languages, which are from Sanskrit. And I couldn't find this word in any of the Vedas through Vedabase or other like Sanskrit dictionaries. I did find the word lubhyati, but I don't know that word. But that's what one of these old white guys who translated Vedic literature in the 1800s said. So love is a word that has many, many different meanings for us in English, but the root of the word comes from passion or desire. And the word that I've heard the most in Sanskrit, at least from the Vedic literature, is kama. So the English version of love is more related to passion and desire, but there's many different forms of love. And we'll see if we can touch on some of that. I've chosen a very deep topic to look at because I think it's very important. I don't know if I'll be able to do complete justice to it this evening, but I welcome questions once we get a little bit more into this. But for now, let's look at these three things: compassion, intention, and love. So it's important to start with compassion. And I chose a verse from all three of the verses related to these things come from Bhagavad Gita. The first two are from chapter 2, which you're all familiar with, I'm certain. Here we have Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, completely distraught, bewildered. In fact, the opening verse of chapter 2 in the purport of chapter 2, verse 1, Prabhupada says that Arjuna is overcome with compassion. And here I am telling you to start with compassion. Meanwhile, Arjuna is in the situation because he's too compassionate. But the point, I think, remains. Compassion is very important. Arjuna went a little too far with his compassion to the point where he forgot who he was, what his position was, what his duty was, who his friend, his best friend is the Supreme Lord. And he forgot all of that because he was overwhelmed with compassion for the people on the other side of the battlefield that he would have to kill. And compassion can be something that pulls us away from reality. It can be something that overwhelms us. If you're too compassionate, every single thing you see can be a drain on your heart and on your mind. But compassion is still a very powerful tool for building and strengthening relationships. So in this verse, which I'll try to read, Traigunya Vishaya Veda, Nistraigunya Bharvojuna, Nirvanvo Nitya Sattvasto, Niryogakshema Atmavan. The Vedas deal mainly with the subject of the three modes in material nature. O Arjuna, become transcendental to these three modes. Be free from all dualities and all anxieties for gain and safety, and be established in the self. So Krishna is telling Arjuna, hey, come on, come out of this. Prabhupada says in the purport that the Vedas are concerned with these fruitive karmic activities, actions, and reactions because they're meant to gradually elevate society to the transcendental plane, to the stage of bhakti. And of course, Krishna here is talking to Arjuna, and Arjuna would have known all of this. He was a kshatriya. He, of course, knew all this Vedic knowledge, but he was so distraught and overwhelmed that he couldn't understand it. he was just thinking about his grandfather, his uncles, his cousins, everyone who was going to die in this battle. I grew up in New York. I grew up in the Bronx. Living in New York City, as many of you have or done, or even in New Jersey, like you live in a big city and there's suffering everywhere. People living on the streets, people that you see on the trains and the public transportation, on the buses, trying to get by, not knowing where their next meal is going to come from, who's going to be kind to them or hurtful to them. And if we forget who we are, we can get lost in that. But in the same way, if we forget who these people are, that these other people are spirit souls as well, who are going through life just as we are, without compassion, you can kind of put blinders on and ignore all of that. But with too much compassion, then that's all you see. And so there needs to be some kind of balance. So we can look at the good, we can look at the bad, we can choose to see the good, we can choose to see the bad, we can navigate through life in one of two ways, or both ways. But I heard a story Radha Swami told about a bee. And he said that bees are wonderful creatures. Bees pollinate flowers, they help give us food. They are always looking, no matter where they go, they're looking for the pollen or the nectar. They're looking for the good things in life. They could be in a field of garbage and trash, but they'll look for the flowers and they'll go far to get that pollen, to get that nectar that they need so that they can produce, in the bees' world, honey to feed their offspring. And we can, as humans, take care of these bees and nurture them, help them to continue their duties. And the bee is, a very, very important animal. On the other hand, we have the fly. And the fly can always be found in the worst places. The fly is always looking for the dirty things, the garbage, the refuse. And the fly goes through its life and it exists, it lives just as much as the bee. But the flies very rarely will stop on a flower. The flies will very rarely produce anything except more flies. And so if we go through life as the fly, you live in New York City. I remember sitting on the train and just getting so angry at how dirty the trains were, how bad it smelled. Why are these people so loud? Why? That was the fly mentality, looking for all the bad things, trying to see why was this bad? Why is this bad? How can, and just getting more and more upset. And then I take that anger with me, and the next person I interacted with might feel some of that anger or that upsetness or that disgust. But there's also another option. You're sitting on the train and those things are happening, but perhaps you're chanting, or perhaps you're just looking at something that doesn't upset you, or you're thinking about somebody or someone that you love. And you're in that same situation, but you look at it differently. And that here is, in a small sense, what Krishna is telling Arjuna. Be free from these dualities. There's good and there's bad. They exist. Everything in this world is tinged with good and bad, and everything in between. It's very difficult to go above those things. I know myself, I am no Arjuna. I struggle with day-to-day life and dealing with anger and happiness all the time. But if you can try to be compassionate in that moment, whatever it is, it can help you to realize that good and bad come and go, but you're always here with yourself, and Krishna is always with you. And in those moments, choosing the good things, focus on the good things, will help you move forward in the good things. By being compassionate and seeing that, oh yeah, maybe those people are being loud over here, but perhaps in their home life, if they're young kids, maybe they can't be loud at home. Maybe they get hit if they do anything wrong and they're here and this is their one moment of freedom. Yeah, it might be annoying, but they're doing something that they're not allowed to do or they're not able to do because they would get seriously injured otherwise. So compassion in that sense is just allowing you or myself to allow them to have that distance and not necessarily taking it on as they're an affront to my senses because I am offended. In a personal relationships, sometimes you're with somebody and not everything can be as ordered or as strong or as nice as you would like it. And maybe you need to do more or they need to do more to help you. Being compassionate when someone else isn't able to go all the way allows you to serve them. And by serving someone else, you're helping yourself be a better person. In reading this verse and looking at different speakers and acharyas who had spoken on this, there was a lecture that Prabhupada gave on this whole section from verse 40 to 45. I think from what I remember reading, it was in like 1968 or 69. There was a guest who had asked Prabhupada, how many people are as enlightened as you are? And Prabhupada told him, what a silly question. Why would you even ask that? When you want to go somewhere, you go to the airline and you buy a plane ticket. You don't ask the airline, how many tickets have you sold before you fly on the plane? You just go. So in this case, if you want enlightenment or if you want Krishna consciousness, just go. See where it takes you. And I feel like that applies to the situation we have here as well. It doesn't matter why someone is behaving the way they are. Be compassionate to them. Now, be very careful. I don't necessarily mean to make yourself a doormat. You do not have to accept when somebody does something horrible to you or negative to you. You should not let anybody walk on you. So being compassionate is not a license to be taken advantage of. But that same example of being in the train, if there's teenagers being loud on the train, you have an option. You can get angry and stay quiet. These kids are so annoying. Or you can breathe. They're doing their thing. They haven't affected me in any real way. Maybe there's something else going on with them, and let it go. And just by letting that go and having a moment of compassion that you didn't even outwardly show to anybody, it can calm the anger inside or the feelings of annoyance, and your rest of your day can be better. So if we can be compassionate and just rise above, not necessarily the dualities of the modes of material nature, but just rise above the anger and the viciousness of day-to-day society, it can definitely make things better. Compassion is, I think, sorely lacking in the world at large. I think we reserve our compassion for people very close to us. And it's difficult to show compassion for people we don't know. But if we remember, truly remember that everybody we see is a part and parcel of Krishna, just as we are, being compassionate is easy. Now, that doesn't mean to say that I am compassionate to everybody I see, not by any stretch of the imagination, but it's definitely something that I think about. And I try to be compassionate when I can, and try to be less angry. I know when I was younger, very, very easy to be angry, to fly off the handle, to take any little what's the word? Any little poke as a reason to get upset and angry. And I've toned that down a lot over the years. I think using that energy for positive things is a lot better, a lot better use of my time. So next, I'd like to look at intention. So I originally had this labeled as patience. And I didn't feel that patience went very well with the verse that we'll have here. But I think a little bit on patience, I'd just like to say, be patient with yourself. Be patient with the people you interact with. Gaurav Kumar mentioned I was a teacher. I was an English teacher for about 13 years. And as a teacher, you learn patience. You have to be patient. It's important to be patient with your students, because when someone is learning something, it takes a different amount of time for each person in the class. Everybody learns differently. And if your the teacher in front of the class is impatient, every student will see that instantly. And that creates a very negative environment. All of us, especially myself, are learning how to practice Krishna consciousness. We're learning how to live in this world that somewhere in the vast reaches of time we chose to come to, birth after birth after birth, for whatever reason. And in that way, we are not only our own students, but we are trying to teach ourselves. Our gurus are trying to teach us. Krishna, through the Bhagavad Gita and all the other literature, is trying to teach us. We need to have patience with ourselves. Sometimes we make mistakes. Sometimes people with us will make mistakes. But being impatient doesn't solve anything. It just, that burning coal we talked about, same thing for patience. If you're impatient, you get angry. Man, why isn't this going fast enough? Why is this line not moving? How come this car is stopped? And meanwhile, nothing is changing while you're being impatient. So patience is important, but I think intention works better for this verse. So this is chapter 2, verse 47. This one's a little hard to pronounce, so I'm going to try my hand at it. Karmani eva dikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana ma karma phalaketu bur ma te sangos tvakarmani. You have a right to perform your prescribed duty, but you are not entitled to the fruits of action. Never consider yourself the cause of the results of your activities, and never be attached to not doing your duty. I know that this verse has been spoken about at length thousands and millions of times over, and I will not be able to do it justice in this talk. But the thing that stood out the most to me in this verse, in this context, relates to intention. So a lot of the times when we do something, especially if we do something for our parents or for our spouse or for our family members, we feel often, at least I know I do, I feel that they should be thankful for that, or they should be grateful for that, or I've done this for you, so now what are you going to do for me? And it's very easy, again, to fall into this mode of, you did this, I do that. They did this, they do that. Tit for tat, quid pro quo. But Krishna says here, you are not the cause of these activities, nor are you entitled to the results of those activities. Everything you do is through Krishna. Krishna is the doer. Krishna is the enjoyer. So while we may do things, we are not necessarily entitled to think that that's ours when we finish it. You watch TV and every single advertisement, buy this, you deserve it. Upgrade this, you deserve it. You work so hard every day. Take a vacation, you deserve it. And that, I think, encapsulates this entire material existence so well. You are here, you've done something, and now you should reward yourself. It goes on and on and on. And we are just conditioned to believe that every exchange has to result in a net gain. We work X amount of hours, we get paid Y dollars. We invest this time, we should get this result. And sometimes that may be true, but if we expect it and then it doesn't happen, we feel terrible. If you expect something's going to happen and then it doesn't, you feel awful, and it destroys everything you worked for, because you feel like, oh, what was the point? I didn't get anything out of it. Meanwhile, you toiled so hard, and just because you didn't get what you thought you were expecting, then somehow you feel that your effort was worthless. And that's really hard to deal with, because we live in this material world, and yeah, when you work, you need to get paid because then you have to pay your bills and you need the money to buy food, and and it goes on and on and on. And that's a different level of expectations. I don't think that you can't have any expectations, nor in a relationship should you not expect a person to return your love in some way, or reciprocate to some level. But the focus here is what I'm talking about. When we do something for somebody, if we focus on the idea that, okay, I helped this person in this area, so then next week they're going to help me, that focus then is on what they're doing for me and not what I'm doing for them. If you want to be helpful to somebody, do it. Be helpful, just for the simple reason of helping them. If they then turn around and reciprocate something for you later, wonderful, you've got a bonus. You did something nice for them and they did something nice for you, but because you didn't expect it, you don't feel bad if they don't do it. Of course, this doesn't translate exactly to every type of relationship. Your boss says, do this, you have to do it, it's your job, okay, right? But, for example, I don't know. I had a lot of work to do today, and this evening, Andrea took Priya, who's sleeping on my lap, out for a walk this evening. And I was working. I was about to finish up work before our call, and I heard her doing the dishes downstairs. Now, she didn't have to do the dishes. I would have done them later tonight. I'm very grateful that she did them. She doesn't know that I know she did them, but I will do something for her tomorrow morning. Maybe I'll make a special breakfast or something. But that she doesn't know that. And she didn't do the dishes because she thought I was going to do something for her. She did it because she was just being nice. She was downstairs. She knew I was working. She did the dishes. And I know her very well. I know her intention was to do something nice. So following through with your intention relates to the idea of not being here with the fruits of your action. We can still, I know in later verses, Krishna explained this in more detail, and I'm not I'm not entirely sure how to cite it, but I do know that it is explained further. We can enjoy our things that happen in this world, but we need to recognize that Krishna is behind all of them. And we are enjoying these things because he is enjoying them first, for the same reason that we offer food to as prasadam before we eat it. It's for Krishna, and then we can have it. So intention is really, really important to keep in mind when you're doing something. I know that, for example, with japa, in the morning, if I'm thinking about other things, oh, I have to do this today, I have all this work, I have da, 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 you get sidetracked, and you go through your rounds, but they don't feel good, they don't feel right. But if you focus on the intention and I am intending to do my japa now, and you do it quality japa over quantity, you can get that idea of following through with your intentions. I'm sorry, I'm just looking at my notes. Now, if you bring this intention to a deeper relationship, perhaps with your parents, or if you have the privilege of having them alive, with your parents, or with a very close loved one, with your spouse, we often look at relationships as what do they say, a two-way street. One's going this way and one's going that way. But in most close relationships, both people are going in the same direction. And if you focus on your intention in building a strong relationship with somebody, if that other person wants to go in the same direction as you, it will be successful. If both of you are focused on what's going to happen on the next stage of the relationship or the next point, then you might encounter some problems because you're not paying attention to the way you're going. I had a friend who taught, and he was a teacher, but in a different sphere of learning. And he said, having a map doesn't make you a good driver. So just because you know the direction of where you want to go doesn't mean you're going to get there successfully. If you don't know how to drive well, if you don't know how to pay attention to your surroundings, you may not get to your destination. And your intention is how you get there. So by focusing on your attention and starting with compassion, you'll be on a good road, so to speak. Of course, that's complicated because this world is complicated, but the idea, I think, is simple enough. And finally, surrender to love. Now, here at least in the United States, I grew up not necessarily with the Latin version of this, but we say love conquers all, right? So let us surrender to love. This phrase is from 2037 years ago. And it's attributed to Virgil in one of his first works. The character in this play or this poem that said this was a man who was head over heels infatuated in love with a woman. And this woman was, in love with a lot of people. They say she was that they scholars think that she was a real person. And if she was a person that they think she was, then she was also in love with Brutus and a whole bunch of other people. It's a long story. But anyways, this guy is here and he's so distraught. And he just says this comment to Apollo, the sun god in Roman mythology. And Apollo is trying to intervene in this guy's love life. And he just says, love conquers all. let's surrender to love. I can't do anything in this situation. This woman has all the power over me. I'm going to die. My life is bereft. And we have adopted this here in the West as like this great proverb that love conquers all. Meanwhile, this guy is talking in a sense that he is infatuated with a woman he can't have, and now he's going to die. And I think that kind of summarizes how the West looks at love. It's this object of desire, and it will consume you in its fire. Obviously, that's not what I mean here with surrender to love. I'm jumping very, very far ahead in the Gita to the end, to the last verse of the Gita. Sarva dharmam parityajya mamekam sharanam braja aham tvam sarva papebhyo moksha yishyami ma shuchaha. Abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reactions. Do not fear. So at the end of the Gita, Krishna has summarized everything he told Arjuna for the previous 16, 17 chapters. And he says, surrender unto me. Krishna is love. Surrender unto love. Surrender unto Krishna. And everything will be okay. Do not fear. The Gita is giving us an older version of this surrender to love, much older than Virgil. Maybe Virgil was informed by this, but Krishna is telling us, surrender unto him, the source of everything, the cause of all causes, the doer of everything, the enjoyer of everything. If we understand that he is love and we are all parts of him, then everyone we encounter is also love. And viewing people and the world through that kind of a lens, as hard as it may be sometimes, I know from my own experience, it's very, very hard to love some people. Some very close people too, family members are very hard to love sometimes. But if we can make the attempt to see others through that lens of love with compassion, and if that is our intention, the road will be a little more defined. It might be a little less bumpy. And even if it doesn't always get to the point that we think we're going to go, we won't be as agitated on the journey. So that's all I have for us tonight. I'm happy to entertain any questions. I thank you for your patience. I apologize if I butchered any of the Sanskrit. Thank you very much.
Wow, that was wonderful, wonderful, Paul. Thank you so much. I mean, so many wonderful points. I mean, you started off by talking about relationships. It's not war, but love. And then you talked about compassion, what it actually means to suffer with. I think you are speaking with realizations. There's so many things that you're doing right now in your life also, which talks about compassion and intention and surrendering to love. And even in your life, we can see how you're going from compassion to intention to love very, very wonderfully. So thank you. And I really like the idea, the example that you gave about when loud kids are in the train and how you should just let go sometimes. And that actually gives us a lot of peace. So thank you for that. I'll just stop summarizing, but if anybody has any questions, I think Paul is great. He'll be able to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Not a question, Paul Prabhu, but more of a comment and something I really felt nice about. So this second chapter of the Gita that you quoted from. So second chapter is usually considered very, very a philosophical one in a way. What I was amazed with is how you translated that into relationships. So that is really amazing. So yeah, that is something I liked. And you mentioned that the word compassion comes from the Latin word compati, I think, which means to share the suffering of someone, right? And I'm currently reading this book, Miracle on the Second Avenue. It's about the 26th Second Avenue, how things started off there. And it's really amazing. When I heard this, I remembered the example of Prabhupada, how he completely lived according to this definition, right? He would cry tears by seeing the suffering of, all the people around him, especially in the Bowery, right? He would literally cry tears. And you also mentioned that being compassionate is not a license to being taken advantage of. Now that is again reflected in Prabhupada in a way when so I don't remember the name of this person. Prabhupada is staying with that person very initially, and then that person starts becoming very violent and threatening to Prabhupada under the influence of drugs and all that. So that time Prabhupada actually he goes to Mukund Maharaj. That time he's Michael Grant, and he tries to find out a different place to stay because this person is getting out of control, his roommate. And that is when Mukund Maharaj actually finds the storefront on 22nd Avenue. So this is like the being compassionate. Prabhupada also cried for all these people, but at the same time, he didn't let them stomp over him because he had a mission, right? He had a mission. And and that is something that really I remembered, and it kind of connected very well to what you were talking about. And everything else was really wonderful. I loved the class. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, what was the name of the book again?
Miracle on Second Avenue.
I have to read that. Miracle on Second Avenue.
Yeah.
I have the PDF. I have the PDF.
Yeah.
Oh,
I can share it on the group. Thank you.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Jitendra.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat Pranams. Thank you so much for such a wonderful session. I can tell that you are a teacher. You have all the wonderful qualities, and you say one of the best teachers are those who can really share with detailed examples. And I felt like every single one of your points was just packed with so many examples to really illustrate the story, to really illustrate the point. And I can say, oh my gosh, even from so many examples of the wonderful compassion, and as Garp Kumar Prabhu talked about, and you made it so practical, ones that we can really relate to even in New York City, those who are just dancing and screaming and playing loud music on the subways and just having compassion. And it really also made me think of Karam Prabhu's example of the lawyer and the woman he put in jail. And really never judging and always having compassion because you don't know what's going on in their lives. So I felt like your story and your emphasis on compassion really emphasized the point that Karam Prabhu made, and it's really stuck with me. So thank you. And I could just go on. I loved all your examples. I think this was really great. Thank you so much. Oh, and lastly, it was funny when Gar Kumar Prabhu was introducing you and said that you were really into kind of the sci-fi and UFOs. I immediately thought Chandrasekhara Maharaj because he's like super into all of that.
I love that man. Yes, we've talked extensively about those things. Yeah.
Yes. So it's funny that he was the first, I guess, guru or Swami that you met in Krishna consciousness and heard of, and I was like, oh, that's Krishna's arrangement because he's totally like this super sci-fi geeky person that you probably really connect with. So I love him as well, and he's just scholarly, adorable, just so detailed, but also really into like tech and stuff. Anyway, so I thought that was a funny arrangement. So thank you so much, Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Yeah, actually, Chandrasekhara Swami, my wife Andrea had seen him or listened to him a few times. She's like, I really think you would like him.
I thought that too. Just kind of your essence, and then when Gar Kumar Prabhu introduced you, I automatically thought Chandrasekhara because not too many devotees are I would say really into that, and everyone has their own idiosyncrasies and,
Mm-hmm.
and personalities. But Chandra Zakara, I mean, when he talks, he's just like so into tech, and he can just figure these out. And then you have the whole UFO series, and I
Mm-hmm.
just thought that, so I just that was funny.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, Krishna.
Yeah. I just want to say, Prabhu, like your presentation was very practical and like filled with a lot of like real life examples that you were giving, and at every point, like it was, you didn't say like even with like compassion, but also you said like being overly compassionate or like being too much uh, uh, on that, and how it can be like harmful and like not going all the way, so like maintaining that balance.
Mm.
Yep. So, and it was like really like very practical, I would say, every example you gave, and thank you for that.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Paul Prabhu.
Hi, Krishna.
It was a really nice class. So I felt like I was tuned into some podcast that is going on, and the speaker is like going in a real deep talk. And when you said like now I'm going to, and then I was like it should go on. Like I want to hear more. So really, it was like so deep. And but I got a question for you, and that is that you mentioned like when we are helping someone or being compassionate towards someone or loving
Mhm.
someone, and we should just help them without any expecting anything. So that I understood, but when we help someone or when we love someone or when we are compassionate towards someone, or at least we try to. So what about because I have heard like there is like to love and be loved. This is what every human being looks for. So what about like be loved? What about
Mm.
that thing? Like how if we are not expecting it, then isn't it like there is a void for that,
Mm.
or is it something like just my mind made it up, or
Mm.
is there a void or something?
That's a really, really excellent question. That's really excellent question, Vishal. I think that we all are looking for love. We're looking for that reciprocation of love, especially if we're in a committed relationship with somebody. We don't want to, get married for not for love, at least these days. The I think the important thing is where we focus our energy. Now, we definitely, if you are approaching someone with the intention of being in a relationship with them and you want to see if they're going to reciprocate the love that you're giving for them, that's a very important test and a very important step in building that relationship, to see if there is that exchange of love in the sense of what's the word? In the sense of a close relationship. But if you go into every relationship with a person thinking that they're going to love me as much as I love them, that can set yourself up for, bad feelings if they don't. So while the intention is to love and be loved, I think the expectation should be maybe diminished a bit. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. So like as you mentioned, like if you get married or be with someone
Hmm.
and as a friend or as a colleague or wherever. So what about you if you do not have that, you do not receive it?
Hmm.
Or yeah.
I think it depends on the level of relationship that you're trying to build. I know, so in my own life, I have been very lucky to, as a young boy, made very, very close friends with a few people. And I have been friends with a very small group of people for the last 35 years. And I still am very good friends with them today. Now, I've met thousands and thousands of people that I never was able to build a relationship with. And some of those people I felt very bad at the time that I couldn't be friendly with them or that I wasn't able to carry my relationship with them to adulthood. But the expectation, if you think everybody I meet is going to be at the same level of relationship, if I felt that way, then I would be really, really hollow, because I've met so many people that I don't have relationships with, or that I have had relationships with in the past, and now they're in a very sorry state, or the relationship doesn't exist anymore. So for me, when I approach new people or I try to build a relationship with people that I'm meeting these days, I try not to focus on where the relationship will go, but how the relationship is going, which is the intention versus expectation. I'm not sure if that
makes sense.
That's a really good question. Thank you.
Yeah, that was really deep class, bro. Thank you.
Okay, I think we covered everyone. If there are no more comments or questions, I think we can end the class today. I just have a couple of quick announcements. I will stop the recording.